It's very clear in a simple understanding. Okay, so let's start. The plan for today is that we will quickly go through the assignment 1 we did yesterday, and after that we will go through the presentation about the best practices in C# in object-oriented programming. Let's see how it goes from time perspective, and then we will we'll do assignments 2 individually and you will do, and then we can discuss some points that also this week today I will also announce the next home task. It will be the assignment 3 and assignment 4 from object-oriented programming. So and I'll provide the details about it after the session today. So that's the plan. So let's start. So as you remember, yesterday we gone through the assignment 1. Just checking the audio input. So now it should be high. For YouTube translation, for YouTube stream. Okay, so then so then we can move on. So yesterday we basically we were working on the class officer, which basically, as it stands from the name, it describes the officer as the object. So what does it mean? It means that we have the class of officer. So it basically defines them. Firstly, it defines the structure of the officer, template structure. So what does it mean? It means that here we have the name. We have surname, we have working district to point out where is the officer assigned to, and then there's also officer ID and crime solved, number of crimes solved. So from this perspective, we have the structure of the officer, which so here we basically define the values, the parameters of the officer, so just the same as in real life. But then we also have some methods which then describe they do some behavior. So first of all, we have the constructors. We have unparameterized constructor and we have parameterized constructor. Again, why do we need them? Because basically have two options. So first of all, for unparameterized constructor, it is just a simple constructor without any values assigned. Then in this case, it means that we can fill the values, maintain the values after the officer as the object is created. So it means that at this point, when the officer is created, it will be created without any values assigned to it. And then after that, we can use setter methods to then fill in the values. We can provide them here. Comparing to this approach, we also have the approach of using the parameterized constructor. In this case, we can basically provide all the values directly at the moment when the object is created. So this means that we create the object, we pass all values, these values then will be assigned to the officer officer object. In fact, in this case, we can also use mixed approach. We can provide the values here, and then after that we can also set the separate values using setter methods. Yeah, that is also an option. So it doesn't mean that if we set the values once, then we cannot change them. In fact, if we define the values this way, then it is possible to change the values after we initially set them. So that's the point. And then we have some getters and setters, since we have the values defined as the attributes. So the attributes of the class defined as the private attributes, and this is the usual approach what we mostly do. And then it means that we can only access them inside this class from instance methods, which are not static methods. So from these methods we can access the attributes of this class. Okay? So, and that's why we need getters and setters to be able to access these attributes not directly, but from another program. Okay? So we use this program as the base place from where we run our code, and then the class officer is used to store the structure of the officer itself. Yeah. So that's the point. And that's why we need getters and setters to be able to access these attributes. Again, why do we need to define that private? As private, because we want to not allow the direct access to the attributes. And why direct access to the attributes is not recommended? Because in this case we cannot provide the control of how the values are changed. In fact, in practice, we usually need to control the input. That's the user input. It should be controlled. We should adjust the values. We should not allow to make some changes on the values, and we should restrict the changes, and so on. So many different things. And even if we don't have any specific things to be controlled, even in this case, it is recommended to have private attributes, because even in this case, then in future, if we have such approach defined, then it means that in future we are more flexible to introduce such control changes on the attributes. Yeah, because otherwise, if you firstly define the attributes as public, then at some point, so it means that the attributes can be accessed from any place in the code, from any different classes, from lots of different places from outside of this, let's say, officer class, in this case, then it means that when you want to introduce something new, when you want to introduce the control over these parameters, then you must check all the places in all the codes where this is used, and after that also provide the changes in that places where the code is used, where these attributes are accessed directly. So that is more work, of course, and sometimes it's not even possible to then introduce such changes. So in this case, we stick to the approach of using the private attributes. Then it means that we can simply access them using getters and setters, and in future, in case we want to introduce the control, we can simply do it inside the getters and setters, and then just apply all the controls here. And it will not allow direct access to the attributes from outside this class. Okay. So that is the main approach about the structure of the class. So I see I'm still typing. Okay. So if you have any questions, please type them in Discord. Okay. So this is that again. It's a question. So again, for getters, we have the returning tag, which return us the value. For the setters, we don't have the returning tag, since we just simply have the void, the action to be done, and we provide the attribute, the value of the attribute we want to assign to the attribute of the class of the object. So that is, yeah. So again, for setters we don't have a returning tag, we have void, but we have the parameter to pass the value. And for getters, we just have the returning tag, just basically to get the value. That's the point. And for each variable, here we have that. For each attribute, we have getter and setter. Yeah. One getter, one setter. Okay. Question from answers. I want to ask if there is also different syntax of getters and setters, right? Yes. This is what I mentioned yesterday. There is additional setting as additional syntax what you can use. Yeah, so I mean, this is the direct approach. Just a simple approach. There is one more thing, which is actually one more type of syntax, which is actually shorter that you can use. You can use getter. So let me maybe do it for I would like to maybe I'll do it separately. Say sorry. So yeah, in this case attribute remains the same. But what you do, you simply write a shorter public string and the public string of the script. And then you type get, you return a working district. So if I'm not mistaken, this should yeah, of course, then you should public string, but with this return, of course, inside. You have to get forgot about the brackets here, of course. So yeah, in this case, that would work a similar way. And so here you have the. So here you can simply type code. Okay, so that's fine, and that's correct. You then can. Then the point would be that. Let's make it right here. Maybe for the last one we can apply, and here we can type the working district. And yeah, so from here we can actually access this working district. So in fact, yeah, you would access it the same way as you access the attribute. So let me make it on the program. Issue. just failed. Oh, yeah, hold on. Yeah, because I have to replace it. So I just simply duplicate it twice. So that's line 54. Ah, no, actually, yeah, actually that would be. Let's oh no, so that's line. Yeah, sorry. No, that would be correct. So a moment, I'm working district, and here I have working district and working district as well. So that is correct. Yeah, search is line 9. Line 23. Property, let's see. Good. Oh, hold on. I can simply then also pass setter here as well. Setter. For setter, I need to provide the value. So that would be just to not be mistaken. So that will be set, right? Yeah, here we need to provide the value. Hold on. I could. Oh, okay, yeah, then it's the same way. And here we need to provide the value. Of course. Hold on. Oh, yeah. So yeah, that would be a little bit different. So yeah, it just was confusing because of the name. Of course, here we have a working district, and then of course here we need to have the same working district. Yeah, so that was fine. Just the initial issue was that the name was different. The name was different, and yeah. So then I return working district. Yeah, so now that should be correct. And then here I don't need to return anymore. And here I can say that would be this working district, and it actually equals the value I provide to the. Yeah, so that should be fine. Just a little bit of interesting syntax here. So that's not quite typical, but that's actual shorter way we can write. Okay, then this is good. And the last one is syntax error here, of course. We can correct it, and now it should be fine. So let's run and let's see again. Okay, so 11. So let's probably let it actually exist. So we can see it exists here. Then we should actually be able to return it. Here is the problem. Let's return working district. mistake, like there was a little bit of typo. Type that. Okay, so then what's next? Obviously, we're missing this protection levels, so that's the problem. Okay. Yeah, and here then we have the one. So then we have this one. Now it should be fine. So there's typo. Bottom time. Yeah. So now everything's fine. Just confused with the syntax. So now it should be correct. Then we have check. Then we have this. This check 78. So ID times soft number 39, and it's level 2, and yes, that is my additional method for that. So basically, in this case, what we get, again, that's actually the point. I'm still saying this. This is also additional way how we can create getters and setters. After that, getters and setters in addition to just a simple approach is then this way. So basically what happens here we have the public string. So that means that this is practically the same way as the method, but we just simply maybe simplify a little bit getters and setters here. So basically what we do, we access this structure. Yeah, so in fact that's the structure, and then for this structure we have getter and setter. So getter, it means that what we get if we define this, and then as well what we can do my new officer, that would be working, and and then we can set value district, and I guess here we can provide value if I'm not mistaken. No, there was different syntax there. So yeah, I mostly use the generic ones. I mean, not generic ones, but the standard ones. So for the setter, let me maybe double check the double check the setter. There's also such kind of there are also so-called Lambda expressions. They are available in C#, so maybe I will not maybe then no, hold on. Yeah, so now we just can simply access the variables there. Here this way. So then this would be test district. So now it should be fine. So let's say do it this way. Let's enter values. And yeah, so now we can see that the list is changed. So basically in this case we access the variable the same way as we did before. But in this case, in fact, when we access the variable, then it is actually returned as written as the getter and setter. So in this case, we can also apply the logic here and then change the value. Maybe some adjustments, some additions, and so on. Yeah, that is as an option what we can do. So then, yeah, then we have some static methods which then basically did the calculation for our program. Okay. So in theory, I could create the static methods here in this class, but there's no actual difference, and since we work on just the officers, then in practice that would be better to define the methods directly for the officer class. So in addition we defined, so yeah, we overrided the methods to string. So that's the generic method for all the object classes in C#, and if we redefine to string, then we actually redefine the representation of the object. So this means that this is how the object is represented as a string. If, for example, we pass the object as a string, what we do here, then in this case, toString method is actually called. Then all the actions from there are quite executed. Yeah. So that's the point here, and then basically did some calculations based on the officers provided. And that was it. That was it about this problem. Okay, if you have any questions, you can mention them. If not, then I would like to go to the best practices to be used in object-oriented programming. So, yeah, because again, even right now we come through some best practices to be used in object-oriented programming. So we talked about private attributes. We talked about how we should write the methods, how we can define the objects, how to reuse the logic in the methods. So, and in this case we will talk about more things to make the code better. So, first of all, we talk about the clean code. So, when you work with different programs, then most likely you will always face such a thing called clean code. So what does it mean? It means that it means that this is what you must do in order to call yourself a professional. So yeah, that's fine. On practice, unfortunately, there are some programmers who basically just want to finish their code without any just wish to and will to follow the rules of the corresponding programming language and also the corresponding project requirements. Because again, just before we talk about the best practices, remember that when you work on the projects, on the exact projects, then on the result, in each project you may have most likely you will have specific requirements, specific rules for the coding. So there may be the naming conventions, the structure of the code, how the code should be documented, what are the comments to be written in the code. So there may be lots of different things defined specifically in each project. In this case, we talk about general things, but on practice you may face more guidance on the code to be written. So these are the things. And so yeah, so in fact there's no reasonable excuse for doing anything less than your best. So in theory that's true. In practice there may be some estimates, some deadlines of the code, and in such cases it takes time, and sometimes developers go in rush, go in hurry, and they skip following the rules. But in practice, in long term, all these rules, they should be followed. Yeah. And yeah, in software, 80% or more of what we do is quantity code maintenance. Yeah. So we maintain the existing code, we improve the existing code, we change it according to new requirements, and so on. And so there are lots of different things what we usually do to improve the existing code. Yeah, the first thing is readability. As I said, mostly your code will be visible for other developers, your code will be reused by other developers, so you need to write it in a way that the other developers will understand it. Yeah, so of course you can write the comments, that's good, that's always good, but also in addition to this, your code should also speak for itself. Yeah, I mean, you should write the code in the way that others will understand it, and that will understand how does it work. Okay. And of course, you should make it easy to read, and also make it easy to then change it after that for other developers and for yourself as well. So yeah, in code refactoring is necessary because we all are the humans, and humans may make some mistakes, that's fine, also in programming, and that's why usually when the code is written, it should be reviewed by others, and then others may provide some corrections, some comments on the code, on the things to be changed after that. Yeah. So then we do major software change from scratch every 7 years. So that's also true. You should name a variable using the same care with which you name a firstborn child. So yeah, that's also kind of valid comment. Yeah, in fact, also you should usually you should skip defining such variables like test1, test2, test3, or name1, name2, name3, because as a result it may be too confusing for those who read the code, and also for yourself, because again in practice you may face right now we just have a few lines. Yeah, in general we work with a few lines of code, but in practice we work with lots of different files, lots of different classes, lots of different branching parts, and in this case it's very crucial to write the code and name the variables correctly and in the way that you also understand what these variables mean. Okay, so that's a crucial point. And yeah, so then next thing is about the naming of the variables. Okay? So I mentioned it several times, but also you can take a look here on two examples. So first example is that you define something like this: phone string, phone number. So phone string, that's the type, and phone number, that's the variable name. So then again we have phone string, the variable type, and phone number, phone Alice, variable name. And comparing to, then you have phone number, which is phone of Alice work. Then you have phone number, phone of Alice home. So what's the point? What's the point here is, so here we have number here and number here. So in general, this means that this is just number in general and this is something specific. So that makes confusing, right? Because in fact the phone number home Alice can also be the phone number, right? So in this case we already see the confusion at the beginning of the definition, right? Because phone, again, what I just said, we just have general naming, then we have subnaming. So in case we have same variable types, then we should then have, let's say, the same level of naming. Yeah, like if we say this is the phone number, then this should not be the something subset of the definition. Yeah. So that's again confusing. That's confusing. In this case, again, phone string also confusing, because why can't we just simply use string? In this case, everything is fine. Yeah, phone number, that's clear, that's fine. And here we have the work number, work phone number, and then we have the home number. So everything is clear, because we know that the home number cannot, okay, in theory, maybe in some cases, home number can also be the work number, but in this case, of course, in general, we assume that these are two different numbers. Okay, so any questions so far on naming? Again, you should name the variables in the way that they are not confused. Each variable is not something what can be confused with other variable, yeah, and at each part of the code, at any part of the code you write, you should then be able to identify what does this variable mean. So then, for the names, class names and methods, we use possible case. In previous example, we did not do it, because of the task we had. In the task, it was written to write the names of the methods starting with lowercase. That's also usually a valid approach, but in C# we start the names of the methods with uppercase letter. So what you can see also from generic, from standard methods, they are named starting the capital letter. And the same is for our method, what we will write. Then we should normally start with uppercase letters. For the methods, and for the class names as well. Okay, the question from Maria, shouldn't we avoid long naming? In fact, long naming or practice is not a huge issue. It's not a huge issue, at least from my experience. Of course, you should not write like lots of characters just because of. In fact, yeah, if you have lots of characters, the only thing what may be the problem is that it may be harder to actually write and read this variable. But to be honest, on my experience, that was never a problem. Yeah, if the variable name is long. And the only problem is that it takes more space in your code. But in practice, no, I never had any issues with providing long naming. Of course, we should have the limits. I mean, you cannot just simply type something such long. Of course, that would be, let's say, quite long. But if you have the options to name your variable shortly, or to name your variable in long way, and in case you name the variable, in case there's the short name, and it is not 100% clear what this variable means, then it's better to provide the long name. Because, I mean, in practice, there's no problem with long names. Again, just up to normal limits. Yeah, not just something like what takes all your code. But so, if you don't have any idea how to name your variable in short, then yeah, of course we usually shorten the variable names. Like for example, if we have working district, then of course that may be something like work district, yeah, maybe something like this. And so yeah, that's fine. We usually make the variables shorter, but I mean, about the long namings, that's not the problem. So just up to normal limits, and how we consider it's fine for us to write, but that's not something what is prohibited to be done. Yeah. So again, too long names, of course, that's just hard to write them and also hard to read them. But for just normal long variables, usually that's not a problem. Not the first one. Because again, the thing is that for short names, usually it makes the purpose of the variables clear for us. Yeah. So that's why. Again, maybe in some cases, in some particular cases, this may be the thing where the long names are not allowed, but these are maybe some particular cases, and you will be informed about them when you write the program. But in usual case, that's not a huge problem. Yeah, so choosing good names takes time, but saves more than it takes. Yeah, I mean, on practice about the names, it's not something what you should spend the whole day. Yeah, of course, it's said here that you should think about, but from my experience, not too much. Yeah. So it's not like you have to strictly follow each symbol in the word, but the good thinking about it, that's always a good thing to do. Yeah, the name of variable function or class should answer the big questions, so that's also true. When we, so that's also very good thing, also from my experience. From my experience, what I usually seen before and what I avoid, and also I ask my colleagues and also the students to avoid, is that, let's say that you have the method which says get value. Yeah, so for example, inside this method, yeah, we have get name. So what does it mean? What should this method do? The name says to us. It means that this method will return us the name. And the key point here is, and also for you to understand, it should only return the name. It should not do any other specific actions. I mean, of course, if you have the validation, some validations, that's fine. Some adjustments, that's fine. And the result, all these actions must be related to the name returning. You should not do something like setting surname, for example, in this case, or just changing some other values which are not related to this specific method name. Yeah, all the actions must be related, directly related to the method, to the name fetching in this case, and nothing else. Yeah, because I know on my practice there I see the code where there is something like calculate today's date and calculate date, but so just if we talk about maybe some things related to the cars, yeah, to the vehicles, then the method name would be get a license plate number. But on practice, there may be some actions like update this document, update another document to do the changes for the exact person in the database table, and so on and so on. So lots of different things may be done which are not related to the fetching the license plate number. Yeah. So in this case, that's the same. If the name of the method is getName, we should not do any side actions which are not related to name fetching. That's also the rule. That's also the rule. What you should normally follow. What good code should normally follow. And if method name is get something, then it should return you something, and no other specific things to be done there. Yeah. So that's also the thing to understand. Yeah, so why, and then of course after we define a method, then we should also understand why it exists. So it means that the method should not just basically be defined and used, never used without any specific purpose. Yeah. If it exists, then it should be done for a particular purpose. Yeah, so then it can be used somewhere and used with the reason. Then what it does, of course, we should understand what the method does. You should not just do some random things, only the things we want to achieve and how it is used. Yeah. So in this case, also when you think about the access modifiers, then we should understand how the method is used. If the method is used outside the class, if it is used only maybe by the class itself, so in this case that would be private. So we think about how it is used, where it is used, what are the values we can use, what are the specific values, the variables we can use, and so on. So then if the name requires a comment, then the name is not about its intent. That's maybe true, but not in all the cases. Sometimes we may need to write the comments, and comments are always fine. But yeah, so in general, this thing mostly means that we should not do the side actions inside the methods. So the actions which are not related to the name of the method. So that's the point as well here. So here's the example. We have list. So this is the topic about collections. We'll talk of course as well. So there's the list. So the list can be returned for the method get them. So in this case, what I already see from the name of the method, which it is a total mess, because again, get them. Who are them? What this method actually wants to achieve? Why it is here? Why get them? Why not get someone? So that's absolutely totally unclear. What get them means. Then inside the method we have list 1. So what's the difference between list 1, list 0? Why it's not list 0, not list -1, and so on. So unclear from the naming perspective. Then again, the list again, which list? I also forgot to mention this one. So that's the name of the attribute of the class. So the list, actually list the list. Why it's the list, not something else? Where is list 1, list 0, and so on. So again, totally unclear. Then the variable x. I mean, if you write something what is related to some maybe math task, math exercise, maybe also math theory, then maybe x is a fine option, but I mean not in general way. In specific math case, that would be fine. To use x, but in general, of course, it's not correct. So again, I guess it's obvious for you that this is not the code. This is not the right code. And also, class name example. I mean, of course, if there's just for some testing purposes, you may want to test something, of course you can write. But I mean, in practice, when you deploy your program to someone, then this is not correct. On the other hand, we may have to have the method which provides the right naming. So here I see it. There's the method which returns the list of white bound cells. So that's pretty much clear. And again, I have the local variable white bound cells. Then I have the cell, which also fine. We go through the chessboard. Also fine. No, I can see that this is the chessboard. This is not some kind of list or something like that. So here I also have the index, pole. So all the variables, all the constants. In this case, we're talking about the constants. These things are all correct. All fine. I can understand what is needed here. What's the meaning? What's the purpose of these things? So that's absolutely fine and good. So next things, programmers must avoid leaving false clues that obscure the meaning of the code. So that's also true. That's quite obvious thing, I would say. Do not refer to a grouping of accounts as an account list unless it's actually a list. So also true, because for you may have different types of groupings, and not only those. Like that will be the array. You may define it as the array, and in this case that won't be really correct. And then the word list means something specific to programmers, so that's true. That's actually the data type for the collections. Then the accountant group or branch of accountants, which explain accountants, will be better. If it's not the actual list. Technically, so the list type. Then also be aware of using names which vary in small ways. So could be something like XYZ for efficient handling of strings, and XYZ controller for efficient storage of strings. So if they're not varying, then this is not so good as well. Yeah, also avoid misinformation. So the word variable should never appear in the variable name. So yeah, that's also true, because I guess this is quite obvious, because if we define the variable, then we understand that the variable by itself is also the variable. So in this case, there is no actual need to say that the variable is the variable, so there's nothing to describe, because the name of the variable should describe the meaning of the purpose of the variable, and then of course there's no need to define it as the variable, to define the name as the variable. That the word table should never appear in the table name, so that's also quite obvious thing. Yeah, so how is name string better than name? So would a name ever be floating point numbers? Also not. So the data types should normally also be excluded from the names, because again, if we talk about the data type, so we can simply navigate to the variable, then we can see that the variable type is string, so I don't need to check what's the data type of name. Because I definitely can see that that's the string, nothing else. So also don't need to mention data type. So also do not provide this information, and do not confuse, and do not provide the information which is not needed. Yeah. So yeah, that is maybe something what Mari asked about. Long namings, you should normally not provide them the information which is not needed. Yeah. So in this case, of course, in such way, the long naming should be avoided. Yeah. So just do not provide information which is not actually needed. Yeah. So then, if you can't pronounce it, you can't discuss it, is also something like that. It's also true about pronounceable names. So they should be pronounceable, they should be meaningful. And so then it's also about the thing that the names of the variables should be clear and understandable for everyone. So that's true, you should not normally write some. Again, in practice you may have such cases, like if maybe there's something technical, so there may be some technical terms which of course may be not really pronounceable. In such cases you may use unpronounceable names, but these may be technical terms. Yeah, if you work with the technical terms, then sometimes that's maybe fine. It's not restricted. Yeah, then for the short names, single letter names or numeric constants have a particular problem in that they are not easy to locate across body of the text. Yeah, so for example, you have long name and you have me, so the problem is that also for short names it is harder to detect them in code. Yeah, so in this case also me of course means a poor choice for any variable programmer. I need to search. That's true, because again we usually use Ctrl F inside our code, and if we search for me, then we will actually, again, even in this case, you can see we have 48 matches. But if we type working district, then we see there are only 14 matches, and all of them are related to the working district variable. That's the good point. Yeah. So, and yeah, in fact, in some programming languages, me means different thing. So in some programming languages, me is maybe the same as this. And as we have this in C#, then it may be me in other programming language. And that's also possible. And the usage of it then may be quite confusing. Yeah, then any searchable name becomes a constant in code. That's also true. Yeah, then the second one you main, the comments. We already used the comments in our code, so as you already know, we need them to to provide some information about the code, right? Because again, in general, we should write the good code which should mostly speak for itself, but sometimes maybe we want to express the idea why the code is constructed this way, this particular way. Then in such case, we may need to write the comments, and that's fine. We can write the comments and then explain the code so everyone can understand it. So that's fine. Again, sometimes you may need to avoid long comments, but it also depends on different cases. And also what I wanted to mention is to, and as I mentioned previously, for the code which is commented, you may have a commented code, and you should normally not keep it in the final version of the program. So you can comment the code and keep it in your test version, in the version when you write the program, but at the result, when you deploy your code, you should normally not keep the commented code. Because it basically says nothing. Again, everything what is placed inside the code, it should then provide the information about the program. Then about the program, what happens there, and in practice, at the end, when you have commented code, which is basically what is taken from what was used before, then it provides no information to those who read the code. So that's the point. So then there's also such 5S principles for the code. So that will be organization, kind of sort, tightness, cleaning, standardization, and discipline of the code. So that's also all these principles be always applied. The code, and in general, function should be done one thing. They should do it well. They should do it only. And so then function is doing more than one thing is if you can extract another function from it. And also then functions that do one thing cannot be reasonably divided into the sections. So that's also the point. So then you can, for example, if you have a function append the method append footers. So does this function append as footer to something, or does this append some footer to s? Yeah, that's also important thing to understand as an input or an output. Yeah, also quite interesting thing to understand. So anything that forces you to check the function signature is a button sign. Okay. So in this case, if we have functioning append footer, then we should, or something like that, then we should make it more clear. Like in this case, we have the report variable, the report object, and then we can append footer to it. Okay, so in this case, if we have all the things there, I mean all the signature, all the usage defined here, then we can understand what is actually meant by this code. Yeah, then the next thing is about the function arguments. So this is what I said. We should not normally use too many arguments, because the thing is that if we have lots of, again, for the arguments of the methods, we know that we should pass them in the same sequence as they are defined. And what does it mean? It means that if we have lots of arguments, we should provide them all. I mean, each argument should be provided in exact sequence and an exact position as they are defined in the method signature. Of course, if we have, let's say, maybe more than 3 arguments, then it requires more work, requires more complicated, let's say more complicated work, more precise work to then provide all these arguments correctly. Of course, this is not good. This is not what we want to achieve in the result, right? So that's the point, and that's why we normally have from 0 to 2 arguments. Yeah, 3 should be avoided whenever it's possible, and if you have more than 3 arguments, then it requires justification. again, they're hard to test. This is the combination. Output arguments are hard to understand than input arguments. That's also fine. Yeah, that's also a valid point. Yeah, so for example, we may have something like this. Yeah, if we have like x, y, then we can shorten it using the structure or the object type. Yeah, so in this case, we can define the point as the object. Define it as the object and then use it as the parameter. So in this case, what you can see that you can actually shorter the number of the parameters using the objects. You can define the parameter as the object, as the class. Yeah, that will be the class point. With the point stores, it may store just in two-dimensional case. It will store x and y. And so we can also extend it in 3 dimensions. That would be x, y, z, and so on, and more dimensions. And yeah, then the point is defined in this way as the object, and then it actually stores two parameters, 2 attributes inside. It's a very easy thing to use. Then also common reasons to pass an argument. And ask a question about it. So file exists. So here I can actually write the code as the story. Yeah. So I say I actually check, does file exist? So it returns true or false. Yeah. So I actually have the story, which then allow me to understand if value exists. If it's true or value does not exist, then it's true or false. So yeah, transformation and return, input stream, also file open. My file, so is that I want to open my file, then it will return me the input stream from it. You can actually open a file object. Then the event, also say that it will be white password, then failed n times. So in this case I have the event, which then basically does some actions after that. So yeah, then the function should have no side effects. Yeah, this is what I said. If the function name has one exact name, it should not do something else which is not related to the function name. So that's quite usual mistake what is allowed by different programmers. So please do not do it. If you have something, if you have the name of the class and the name of the method, then it should do only this thing once you define that. So that's the point. And yeah. So the next one is test-driven development. So the first law is you may not write production code until you have written a failing unit test. So yeah, that's also the point, because but yeah, that's maybe quite specific point, I would say, because in fact we always need to test our code. We need to test if the code works fine, and of course the test cases may fail at some point, and it's better to detect the failing test case. Yeah. So the second law would be you may not write in a test more than is sufficient to fail, and not compiling is fail. That's also fine. Yeah, and the third law is you may not write more production code than it is needed to pass the current 3 failing unit tests. So it's also true, because if you also think about the programming, if you introduce more things, then it is harder to maintain them, which is of course an obvious thing to should also an obvious thing. Like have more code, then you have more possibility to write the mistake, more possibility to have the issue. So that's also the valid point. Usually that's the valid point. I say practically always that's the valid point. Yeah. So that is all things there. Yeah, so that's the point. Let's go to next. Keep your tests clean. So test retain your code flexible, maintainable, and reusable. And this is what I mentioned most of the times. It's mostly we write a code which then can be used by someone else. Then minimize assertions per test. So nowadays we will talk about the assertions a little bit later. And also be fast, so it means that fast failing tests, independent, repeatable, self-validity, timely. So yeah, about independent, I would like to point on this thing. And this is why we actually need to write more functions, more methods, because if you write more methods, then you actually write independable code from more independent code from other parts of code. Yeah. So what I want to say that it is actually easier to maintain such code, and also the thing when I said when you have more code, you may have more possibility to fail some kind of test, to fail, to make your project or make your program fail. That's why it is really important to think about the structure of the code to make the pieces of codes independent of each other, and as a result, if you make it, you will have less mistakes when you introduce new change in the code. Because otherwise, if the code is not independent if the parts of the code are not independent from each other, then it makes them code more, makes more probability to fail when new code is introduced. The next thing is about code maintenance. So that starts when the code has been first written. So it means that you first write the code, then you read the code, you see that something may be adjusted, then you adjust, you maintain it. So then you may also need to check for refactoring opportunities, like maybe also ask your colleague or your just anyone who can take a look on your code. And also maybe to ask for advice. That's always a fine thing to do. Then always look in your code to see what may be improved, because in fact you will see that like in 3 years, when you look at your approach of coding, say now, then you will actually want to change everything. So that's usually changes time by time, and your coding approaches will always change time by time. And you will always improve the way you actually write the code. That's also another point. And so the key code maintenance issues are step learning curve. So if developers working with someone else's code, then also insufficient research and cloning, duplication of effort, and that's also about the cases when you don't reuse the code, you don't try the functions, you don't try the methods, then you may have double possible duplications, and also poor compliance coding standards and practices. That's also the point which should be avoided. Then the code quality. Copy pasting isn't inherently bad, but only under the following circumstances. So when we have copy pasting, it means that code is usually duplicated, at least in some way. So then you can use it only when you know what you are doing. Second thing is you are sure that the code you're copy pasting will work. So it's not just simply you take the code from somewhere, you paste it and you keep it. That's not the thing. You should normally understand what you write, and after that you will understand how this works. Or also as an option, what you may do, you may first copy paste the code from somewhere, you can run it and then you can explore it and see how it works also as an option. For the practice, for the learning purpose, that is a good point to do. So that was usually copy paste Stack Overflow. That's the good point if you use Stack Overflow code. I mean, almost everyone does it in real practice and real practice work, but of course, it's always good to understand what is actually copy pasted from there. And also cooperations. Follow the naming rules and code guidelines of the team. This is what I said. The rules may be different in different projects, different teamwork, and so you should normally follow the rules there. There can also be pair coding, like you may write the code, then maybe you may be not sure about your code, then you may need to ask for your colleague for help, to check the code. Also, it's a good thing to write the code, then you write the code and someone else tests this code. That's also a good thing to do. So if there's no one to talk to, then talk to a rubber duck. Kind of. Not too sure about this statement. But just talk to someone actually. Then peer reviews are only useful if they are done by all, to looking at all aspects. So that's also true. And then the consequences. So what are the possible problems there? So first of all, if names are too clever, they will be memorable only to people who share the author's sense of humor, and only as long as these people remember the joke. So then we should not take the names from our emotions, from just our visibility. I guess that's pretty much clear. Cuteness in code often appears in form of slang. So that's also true. In practice, you may need to be serious with your code. You can provide some jokes there, some funny things. In practice, I also see such things in generic code, in standard code I'm working with, but all these things should be limited. Then say what you mean what you say. That's what happens when you write the code. And imagine what will happen if the client reads the code. Also the thing. When you do, we work with the clients, we work with the customers, and then of course we provide the code to the customer. So it means that we provide the product to someone. So in this case, you should think about that. This is the product you provide to the customer, you sell to the customer, and then you should have a good quality. So if you don't have tests, how do you know if something wasn't broken with new code? So that's also true. Every time you change the code, you may need to do testing. You should normally do testing. That's true, and best tests are worse than no tests. Bad tests are worse than no tests. If the test is not correct, so in this case you may have the situation when you tested something in the way that works different way that you actually expected. So this makes the situation even worse, because you think that everything works fine, but in fact not everything works fine, and maybe it works absolutely wrong. So also such possibility exists. And the last thing is the actual implementation. So in fact it's hard to get everything correctly all the time. Of course, everyone makes mistakes, and on programming you will see that is absolutely fine, a normal thing, that there are the issues, there are the problems. So there needs to any mistakes, that's always fine. So there should be the review of your code, and you may need to correct your code. That's always fine and good thing. So then the actual thing would be that you start small, learn a rule, then add another rule. So we basically do one by one. So how I usually do, what's my approach, not only for programming but for all the work in general, in all the aspects of my life, is to start with. If at some point I need to complete something, let's say until some kind of deadline, then what I usually do, I start with the smallest thing I can do. So I actually start with the base. Maybe that's the base which does not work 100% correctly. So I start with the base. I put the base, and then, so again, before the deadline, the work to be completed, I try to improve it, time by time, just pieces by pieces, and then at the end I get the product. I get the final product, which is improved from the base I provided at the beginning. Yeah. Also, I talk to your colleagues, talk to other developers. Is usually a good thing to understand, because again, at first you may not know how to do this or that. You may always be not sure about if you do the things correctly. So then check it with other developers. If you do the things correctly, then you will get the knowledge and make your code better, of course. And yeah, so and now the things which are actually anti-patterns. So I will maybe mention some terms. The first term is spaghetti code. This is quite a popular term in programming, and especially in object-oriented programming, which actually means that the code is not clear, not correct. It's too complicated. Like you have the function which goes to another function, then it goes to somewhere else, and then you have actually the really complicated path for your code. Yeah. So in this case, spaghetti code means that something does not work. Something is created in a really complicated way. So too complicated. Yeah. So it's too complicated to some kind of spiral code. So just too complex. Yeah, then there are some more terms like object. So this is more specific. I want to really explain it. That's a Jonja problem, error hiding, copy-paste coding. Yeah, because the usual problem of copy-paste coding is that the code which is not needed is pasted from somewhere. So in this case, this is of course not needed. Repeating yourself. Yeah, so that's also the quite usual problem. Sequential coupling. So also the thing when something similar to spaghetti code. Yeah, but in addition means that actually the code does the things which should not be done by it. And also the things you can check out these patterns separately. Maybe I will not go deeper on them. And yeah, so now you can also check the link of coding patterns. And do you have any questions about clean code principles? But yeah, so you will see these principles time by time. You will learn them. So that's not something what you should know from the beginning. All the things you will learn in time by time, and then you will start writing code which will follow these principles. Okay. So this is the thing. If there are no questions, no comments, if there are, then just let me know. And so then you know these principles, and now you can go to the individual part of assignment. So that will be assignment number 2, and yeah, maybe I will shortly explain what you need to do here, and then we can check. So first we will have the district class. We need to have 2 separate classes. So first one will be district class with the following attributes. Yeah, so it means that this will be string, title string, city string, then district ID integer, and this would be the array. So if you have these square brackets, it means that this is the array. So then this would be the array. And so in the first section you have the attributes, and in the second section you have the methods. Yeah, so constructor, no argument constructor, argument constructor, getters and setters. You can use the method approach we used yesterday. You can also use the approach I introduced today. Getters, setters, that's fine. And yeah, you also need to redefine the method to string. Write the information about the object. So add the officer. You need to add the officer to the array, and then this will turn true or false. This will mean that the officer is added or not. And also remove officer. Then this will return the information if it is removed or not. And also calculate average level, which will actually calculate the average level of the officers in district. Yeah, in fact, you may need to use you can use the same class we used before. So that's the officer class we used yesterday. And yeah, so then you'll need to use another class district, which will then actually provide the description about the district where these officers are located. Yeah, so here you have actually the composition of the classes. So that's the first thing, and here you have the method. So you need to have a new officer. So this will allow object to be added in the officers in district array. So remove officer also to be added. Then this will remove the officer from the array. So then you will need to calculate average level. So it means that for each officer you need to calculate level, then calculate the average, the mean of these levels for all the officers. Yeah, the next one would be that you need to create a class with the main method, and so that's, again, we can simply use the approach of creating a project, C#.NET project, and then have one main class where you write when you run the from where you run the program, and then you can create multiple files with the separate classes. Now, in this case, that would be we have program, CS main, our main class, and then two classes, officer, and then the district class. Yeah, so then you need to create the methods. So create 7 officer, create a method in the main class where you create 7 officers and 2 districts as the object. So you need to add 3 officers to one district and then other officers to another district. So then print out all information about each district. Then remove 1 officer from the second district. It means that you remove from the officer from the array of the district. Then calculate average level of each district. So yeah, that's also the thing. Then take a look. Yeah. So then you can use ArrayList. At this point, we'll maybe talk a little bit later, but you can use it already. So that's quite specific thing. What you can use, and we will use it. So at this point, when you reach it, let me know. We will then discuss it in more details. So ArrayList is basically something similar to the arrays, but it's more flexible. In the ArrayList, you actually don't need to care about the size. Yeah, the general thing for the ArrayList is that you don't need to care about the size of the array. Like if you add a new element, then you can simply add a new element. Yeah, in the array we cannot add new element because the size of the array is fixed. Yeah, in the ArrayList we can actually add a new element to the array without just creating a new ArrayList. But yeah, at this point we'll talk about the ArrayList a bit later, so you can check it by yourself and Then we can go for it together. So then you'll need to create the array list and put the district object into it, these objects into it, and then you can calculate how many officers are in both districts and calculate the average level of both districts, find out which district is the best based on the average level of officers, and also then you can delete the first district. You will need to delete the first district and see what will happen with officers in there. So these points, so we can now start doing it. So we can do it individually, and just in case you have any questions, then I will be here, so I will stay here. We can now do this assignment, and in case you have any questions, please let me know here. We can discuss them just directly from here. So I will stay here. Any questions, let me know. I will provide the explanation after that. Okay? So then please then start doing, and let me know how it's going on for you. There's no you need to finish it until the end of this session. So the plan is that you start it today. Then I can give you the comments. I can give you the. I'll provide you the help today. So I will show maybe also some things what are not clear, and then at the beginning of the next session on Monday we will discuss this assignment. Go through the solution of this. You don't need to. Actually, you can push it to the remote repository, but for the remote repository you have the home task, which will be until the next Sunday. So that would be 22nd of August. And then we need to complete assignment 3 and assignment 4. Until 22nd of August. Okay, so then we start going, and let me know if any questions we can discuss them together. And by the way, maybe I will have 5-10 minutes pause now, so then I will be back after 10 minutes. things are going. Do you have any questions? If something is not clear, some assistance needs, maybe. No. Okay, I can share the code. Actually, the code is pushed GitHub. I can push it again. So, then navigate the main folder. And I can say assignment. Okay. Here I can push the code. Okay, so we just may want something specifically here. Yeah, so that's fine. Usually, basically the only difference comparing to the yesterday's version is that we have these getters and setters. Just any questions? Yeah, you can ask. So Mr. is starting. So when adding variables to the district class, the last one, what is the syntax there? Yeah, the size of the array. Yeah, in this case, yeah, that's a good question. As you remember how, yeah, actually here we have two approaches. So the easiest approach would be that you provide the just simple limit of the officer. So let's say that you cannot have more than, let's say, 30 officers in this. So in this case, you can create the array which will have 30 elements only. But as the more advanced option, you can create a new array where you can just simply copy all the elements from the previous array. In this case, you would need to create dynamic array. In fact, what you can also do, you can provide the option for the, you create the officers from this main program, right? So use main program, and inside this main program, you can create the option to provide the number of the officers from this main program. Yeah. So in this case, you can do something like, before you create the array, you can provide the number from this program class. That would also be an option. So maybe that can be the static attribute, for example, and you create it, or just simply for the exact district. Yeah, since you have the officers in district, you can provide this number at the point when the district is created, the district object is created. At this point, you can do it that way. Okay. So that's up to you. There are different options, but you can do it. You can provide the number from the running class, which is the class where you have this main method. You can run the program. You can provide number of the elements from there. You can. So you have three classes. You have main class, program class, from where you run the program. Then you have the class district, and you have the class officer, right? So let me show you this one. So you have two. Yeah, this one. So here you have two classes. So here you have this array, right? This is actually, district, that's the object. So before you create the object, you can provide the attributes to this object. And in this case, you can also, from the class where you run this program, that would be the program class, the main method, at the moment when you create district object, so district object is created, then at this point you can provide the number of the elements you will store inside this officer array. Yeah, so you can simply define it in constructor and create parameterized constructor, one more parameterized constructor, and inside this constructor you can, so just or add one more parameter to the constructor. Yeah, that will also be fine. We'll add one more parameter to the constructor, and then this parameter will be actually the size of the array. So the constructor of district class will have the parameter numbers of the officers in district, and once you provide this number, you can initialize the array inside the constructor, for example. Yeah, that would be, inside the constructor that would be, and then you, at this point, you will know the number of the elements in this array. So then create the array. Yeah, I mean the method will work separately, because at the moment when the method is called, you will actually have the slots for the officers. So that's actually an interesting point. So that's the first point. You need to know the size of the array, but again, you can provide it directly from the program class, and from the main class where you have the main method. And secondly, you need to know at which position you need to add the officer. So in this case, what you can do, you can create the counter. So that will be the counter inside district class. So the counter will also be the variable, the attribute, and the attribute will actually show the last officer added. So for example, that would be that I create a separate class. So, and here I will provide something, just a kind of data code. So that will be district. So that's here I can just paste the signature. So the sign is not really needed. So let's say here we have district class, and here we'll have the attribute which will, let's say some kind of array. That would be the array of the officers. Officer, and here we have officers in district. So first point, what I said, inside when you write the constructor of the district, let's say called the constructor of district, that will be parameterized constructor. Here you can provide number of the officers. Yeah, so that means when you create the object, when this district object is created, then you can say that this officer equals new array. New officer array, and here we'll have the number of officers. So that's the size. And then the question may be how you can actually add a new officer to this array. So in this case, we say that what we may need to do, we may need to have, say, private integer, and this will point last index officer. Yeah, that's the last index officer, which will start at 0. So it means that this will be the actual number of the officers added to this array. So what does it mean? It means that when you have the method public void add officer to district, then in this case we of course will provide the officer to be added, and then you actually will know the position of the last officer added. So it means that in this case, what I can do, I can simply then add the officer to the last position. So then that will be last index officer. So this is the way I will add the officer, and I will increment this index. Yeah, or I can do it directly from here, that would be the same. Or just this way, more clear. So, and again, when I remove the officer, I can then simply, and yeah, one more thing, if I, let's say, if last index officer is, if it is 2, if it equals, yeah, so if it equals the number of the elements, so that would be number of elements allowed, that would be the length of the array. Once, then I can maybe print no more officers can be added, and then I simply return the problem. So in this case we provide the check that the user cannot enter more officers because the limit is reached. And the same is for the removing. For the removing, the thing is that that we need to remove. Okay, need to remove specific officer object. So in this case, we need to then remove officer from district. This is more complicated thing, but what we then need to do? Then we need to check all the officers and compare them to this officer. So that will be for each. Then we need to go through all the elements of the array and find this officer. And yeah, in this case we'll need to then shift all the elements. But okay, so then we will do it. We need an officer district in officers in district. So, and here I need to compare. So if officer in district equals the officer provided, then in this case we need to proceed. So first of all, we need to remove it from the array. But in this case, yeah, that's interesting thing. How can we actually remove? Because if we simply remove it from the middle, then we have this empty space. So what can we do? We can, let's say, if it's somewhere in the middle, we remove it from there and then shift all the right elements to this position. So in this case, there's no other choice but to shift the elements. So how to shift the elements? Then we need to do the copy. Officers in district. So that would be more specific case, but there's nothing to do. So in this case, again, how to copy the elements starting at the corresponding position. So then we need to call the method copy. Then that will be this. Okay, that will be this case. Source array will actually be the same as the target array. So then that will be officers in district. Yeah, that's a little bit complicated approach, so I will share it with you. You can simply reuse it. So then the source index would mean that I will start also need the position. We need to have the position, okay. And here I will also search for the position. So -1 here will implement position. Position here, and so here I will do the shifting. Then I start with this position, and then this will be a destination array. Destination array will actually be the same, but the thing is that it will have position -1. Position -1. And then the length will be actually the remaining part. So the remaining part, we start at -1 because then we will have position 0. Okay. So just to start with position 0, we can simply start with position -1. Oh, no, hold on. In this case, we will. Oh no, so that would be. Oh no, so then here it will be +1 and here will be position, yeah? Because we need to do the shifting. So basically it means that if that's the 0 element, we need to shift all the right elements to left. So it means that we start at the next position and we pass it to the previous position. So and then the length would be the actual length of the. You can actually print all the elements of the array. Shift right, so that would be the shifting. Shifting to right. Hope this works. Yeah, actually, I need to test it as well. So let me test, and then once we find it, we can return. Else, maybe, yeah. So else we can print that. We can also print that. That the officer does not exist in district. Okay, there's nothing to remove. Right, I don't know how this code works. To be honest, I hope this code works. Maybe I can. Then I can try to test it. Yeah, let me then first move to this project, and we can actually try then to test it from here. So let's say that here I will yeah, so that's the good question. Which part of code actually? So since we have the array, you actually should understand how we remove the. How can we actually remove the elements from array? So the only thing is that we simply. So if that's a good point. Yeah. So here is the mistake. I already see that the. Let's say if it's the first element, then it means that we just need to shift all the right elements to left. Then the second element will be the first one, third element will be the second one, and so on. And then the last position will be empty. So in this case, yeah, that's a good point. We can then make the last position empty. So then it means that officers in district, the position will be the current position. We have this last index officer. It will be null. Actually, in this case, here's the way we remove. And also, what we need to do then after that, we need to decrement this last index officer because we have one less element. Yeah, so that's the good point. And still see that was the mistake. Here I actually remove this also. Basically we shift all the elements left and remove the last element. And this is the way how we then remove it. But let's check. Maybe not 100% sure if this code works, but let's check. Let's check. Let's create the district. Is here that if we remove the last position, what we need then to do. So if the position is, if it's the last position, then if position equals last, then it's quite simple. So it's the last position. If you want -1, then it's quite simple. In this case, you just simply need to do the following thing, and that's it. Else, oh no, hold on. In this case, that would be just this thing. In this case, we can say if position does not equal, then we need this part of code. Because this part of code will be executed in both cases, if that's the last position or not. And yeah, actually in this case I can also skip using the brackets, because I have only one statement here, and that's it. And so now let's quickly test it. So I can add more officers, and then let's add more officer, and then let's remove officer from this thing. That will be the third one. Oh, let's say the first one. Okay, so let's check what do we have now. Oh, let's count it. Let's find it. Here's something went wrong. There's some errors. Let's check them. 2. Okay, that's the one for the 4. 2. Oh, no, hold on. Hold on. Oh, yeah, so that's the point officer in district, not officers in district. Okay, so now I can check. So let's say test serving. So then I can district and officer ID. Okay, we have the exception, and exception is indexed out of bounds array. So that's fine. Let's check where is it. That's district line 40. Okay, here we have it. Ah, yeah, that's because we added all the elements here. Okay, then we should start. No. Hold on, one moment. Okay, in this case we need to check then if last index officer, if it's less than the length, and this officer's district, if it's less than the length, only then we can include, because otherwise it will exceed, and then we cannot normally use it. Yeah, and another thing is that we need to do it here, then that will be length -1, because last index is the length -1. So let's run the program now. So that will be something like this. And enter officer ID. And in this case it says that the officer does not exist, and in addition okay, it says no more officers can be added. Okay, that's a good point. Let's see, where is the issue? It says, I guess, on the last one, and let's actually, in fact, we need to do then, let's say better if we do it this way. It's -1, and yeah, so then this would be fine. And yeah, yeah, so that should be -1, and then we should, and then I guess we can skip this, because then we can add it here. We can skip check, because in this case we already have this check here. Yeah, and then this should normally work. Okay, let's check now. Yeah, that's maybe a little bit tricky, I agree, but just this needs to follow the idea what we have here. Just get 32, the ID, and the price of 15, okay. So then, I guess everything is fine. Everything is fine. And yeah, maybe just the last thing to check. Maybe let's print the number of the number of officers in district. And of course, if we have get, means that we need to return something. And then from here I can simply return number of the officers in district we have. Okay. Let's write that. Hold on. Typo. Yeah, of course, need to print it. From here, let's print it. Okay. Let's see what do we have now. And chapter. And yeah, so now we have, that's the point, now we have 3 elements. Sorry, that's the one. One will always be the same. Okay, I'm sorry. Then what we can do, we can count. Yeah, we need to count them. And then this would be for each officer in district. Officers in district. Okay. Then for each. Okay, then we can count. So the counter starts at 0, and here we can check that if yeah, actually there are 2 ways. First way is that we need to check if officer is not equal null. Then increment counter, and then we return the counter. So let's check now. So we check how many officers are there. If this is null, that means that this is just an empty cell in the array. Let's enter. Now we have two. And an additional option would be that we use the counter the following way. Since we know that the last elements should be null, okay, if they are empty, then what we can do, we can check. So in this case, if officer equals null, then we stop the counter and we also break. Then break the loop. Oh, and of course, counter should be incremented anyway, but we should break if the officers makes the point and so that's the number problem. Then enter officer ID primes solved. Then yeah, the result is correct, so it means that the officers are removed correctly. So let's say that now we remove the second officer. Let's see what will we have then. Let's test again. Okay, now that's a good point. We have the error. Where do we have the error? That's a good point. If we get the error, then we can now see where it is. How is this? Our exception source area was not long enough. Okay, where was this? Oh, no, hold on. Hold on. Okay, so it means that we remove the officer which is placed at the second position. And the second position. So how does this program will work then? So the position then should not be that one. And okay, then this one will work. Okay, so it means that it should copy the element from the last position. Oh, no, yeah, of course this is not correct, because we should copy not the length, but that would be the length minus position. Yeah, so that would be the length minus position. Yeah, so if we need to replace the first position, then that would be 0, position will be 0, and then we need to place all the minus 1, of course. Minus 1, because if this is the last position, if this is the first position, then we need to shift all the position from right. Then it means that the length will be length minus position minus 1. Yeah, so it means all the elements but first one. Then if that's the, let's say, 8th position out of 10, then it means that we should shift 2 elements left. Yeah, so then it means that the length will be 10, if we have 10 elements. Then the position will be 7, so then the length should be 2. And that's correct. Yeah. So let's check now. Run. So start with this script. Yeah, so now everything seems to be fine. Again, I agree this may be a little bit complicated, so again I will push this to the remote repository. But here is just the way you need to improvise. Again, you can create your own solution. That's what the programming is about. You may need to improvise. And in this case, you can improvise as well. But again, the easiest way would be if you just simply use the array list. Yeah, so as an alternative to this one, instead of using the array, you can use array list. We will talk about the array list next time. So first, I want you to get acquainted with the array list, and then you can apply it to the code. I agree, a little bit complicated, but if you have any questions about this, you can ask. Again, so idea is simple. We have the array, then the number of the elements, so that will be the maximum number of the officers we can allow to be added to the district, to be provided in the constructor. Then from the constructor we create the object, the array, then the index by default will be -1. It means that this is the position, the index of the last officer added. Since by default we have no officers, then the index will be -1. Yeah, it means that there are no officers. Okay? If the index is 0, it means that the last officer is positioned at index 0. So then now we have the array, and now we can add officers to it. So to add the officer, we need to add it to the last position. So in this case, we do the check if the last position is already filled. That means that there are no more places for the officer to be added, and in this case we provide the information that there's no place for a new officer, and then it won't be added. Otherwise, we increment the index, so it means that we provide the last position entered, and then it will go from -1 to 0 for the first iteration, and then we add the officer. So for adding, there is nothing complicated. The complicated thing is to remove the officer, because if we simply remove it from the middle somewhere, then we just simply have this empty space. Another option would be that you go through all the elements of the array, and then just search for an empty place. That would also be the option. Like you add new officer, you search for a place in the array, then you find this place and add it there. And so in this case, the adding would be more complicated. Like you would need to go through all the elements and search for empty element for new element. But in that case, the removing would be more simple. And you just simply need to make the cell empty. Yeah, but in our case, we used a different approach. In our case, we need to find the element. So we go through all the elements and for all the officers in the district and search for the officer which needs to be removed. Then if we found it, then we have two cases. The first case is that's the last position. So if this is the last position, we simply remove it from the last position, and then decrement index means that we have one more space empty. Otherwise, if it's not the last position, like in this case, then we need to do the shifting. Yeah, we basically shift the elements from right to left. Like let's say we have 10 elements of the array, then we found the officer at position 10, at position 5, then it means that we need to remove it from position 5, and then shift all the elements from right to left. Like that would be that 6 officers will go to position 5, 7 officers will go to position 6, and so on. So we'll basically do the shifting here. That's basically can be achieved using copy from one array to another. So basically, in this case, we copy from the same array to the same array. So that's the point. But yeah, that's maybe a little bit complicated. And at the end, we again need to remove from the last position. Now it should be empty because we shifted all the elements. And then, yeah, then also decrement the index. Okay. So, are there any questions? Right. Okay, so we can spend 20 more minutes and 30 more minutes. Just in case you have any questions, you can ask them. I'm still here. Okay. how things are going. Any concerns, any questions? Something is not clear. Okay, so try to make this to pass and get those first row there. No, you have wrong type provided. So you have officers in district, this should be the type. So that's the type. That's the type is not correct. The type should be officer. So it should be officer, not officers in district. Because office, I mean, what you have under the definition, so the definition of the array means that you have the type, then you have like the array. So that you point that you will have the array of this, of the object with this type. So if you provide officers in district, means that you should have the type, the class officers in district, but we don't have such class, right? How about define this class? So it means that we should use officers class. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is that here you also should log home on this line. So this line you should provide the name, the number of the elements. In this case, you don't have the number of the elements defined at that point. Yes. This is not correct. So on the top you can only, so in this case if you want to provide a number of officers, then it should be the number. At that point you don't have this number, right? So it can only be done from the constructor or from the place where you know the number. You cannot just simply provide the number as the variable, because the variable has no value. When you initialize the array, it has the value, but you have the variable only. So in this case, you cannot type something like this. Instead, we need to have value. Or it can be constant, but in this case, we don't have constant. So it can be something like this, but we don't have the constant. I mean, it can be something like this, because I mean, in this case, at least it has the value. So in some sense, it may, in some cases, it may make the sense, but you can initialize the array with the value only. But in this case, we don't have the value what we can use to initialize. That's why, in your case, that's not possible. More questions, please ask. So, okay, so I'm setting class, I'm setting up getters, I have announced the private yes, but I'm trying to set getter size and yes, between strict ID, yes, how the code looks like. I mean, you how you can see that you what you actually how do you actually define the officer? I mean, this getters and setters. Okay. So okay, have the title. Okay. I mean, first of all, this part. Okay, comment it out. It's fine. It's fine, but district ID. Okay, that's fine. No, there's no problem with strings. So it's fine. You have district ID. Okay. And okay, district ID and officers in district. Well, hold on. Okay, that's the namespace you have officers in district. Well, do you have but what is actually in this case? It said officers in district. Where does this come from? So in your code, I see there are no officers in district. You want this part comes from. So I'll highlight that. Is this the namespace or what? Where it comes from? And at what line of code it does give the error? That's the important point. Oh, okay, that's the class. Okay. Okay, that's the class. Have officers in district? Yeah, okay. That's fine, but I mean, what is this? What is this part? Why district is placed under officers in district? So this is the thing I'm confused a little bit. And why, again, here you have, so here you also have the constructor, but the names are different. So this is not constructor anymore. That's one thing. And secondly, why do you have the class officers in district? So why do you need such class? You have the class district and you have the class officer. And officers listed, that's the array stored under the listed class. So that's the part of the listed class. It's not a separate class in our case. Yeah, so that should be the listed class. So for today, we need to maybe finish again the last question, and then you can keep asking questions. I will answer them most likely tomorrow. To get the last question, then we can close for today and then answer in the chat tomorrow. But yeah, the last question. Yeah. So you copy the class, I mean that's fine, but in this case you see that you have, I mean district, in my case that's the constructor. The constructor must have the same name as the name of the class. Yeah. But in your case you have officers in district named as the class, which in our case should not really be this way. Yeah, so I mean if you copy the class that's fine, but then you should, that is actually what I mentioned today. If you copy the code, you should actually understand what you copied. In this case, we have class district and we have the constructor. Yeah, so in this case, you need to copy actually then you need to copy the whole class, and then only after that you can modify. Because if you have different name of the class, then this won't be constructor anymore, and then the type will be actually incorrect. The logic will be incorrect, because the constructor must have the same name as the name of the class. That's the point here. Yeah, so, and yeah, you have this class, but in this case you should basically use the same district class. So what I suggest, I don't suggest you to just simply copy paste everything. I mean you can copy, remove from district class, this is not needed, and also you can take logic from an officer district class as well, and then modify it. But okay, then for today, I guess for the session we can close it. Just in case any questions, again I will answer most likely then tomorrow, have time, then we can have a chat and I will explain the things missed. So please, when you type the questions, then it's better to share the code with me, so I can, and maybe also with everyone. Yeah. So in this case, we can keep the conversation publicly, so others can also join the conversation and take something interesting for them, for you as well. You can take it. Okay, then for today, we need to close the session. Thank you very much for your attention. And see you. Have a nice weekend. Any questions, please let me know. And meet you all on Monday. Bye.